Antonia Barr was born on December 3rd in the late 80s in Temuco, Chile, about 650 kilometers south of Santiago. She was the daughter of Alejandro Barr and Marcela Parra. In addition to Antonia, the couple raised 4 other children: Sebastian, Catalina, Ignacia, and Carla. It was an ordinary average family. Parents gave their son and daughters due attention, provided everything they needed, helped in their studies, and motivated them to succeed. The boys grew up in love and did not cause much trouble to their mother and father. All of them became good, respected people. Antonia was the object of Alejandro and Marcela's pride, even from adolescence. The girl was responsible for any task and diligently studied at school. She dreamed of traveling around the world and purposefully went forward to the realization of her desires. In the same city of Temuco lived a young man named Martin Pradens Duar, a few years older than Antonia. His parents were Ivan Pradens and Paula Duar. Martin's brother's name was Thomas, and his sister's name was Francisca. His biography did not become public, but it is known that even in his early youth, a girl named Danila Alanis Alvarez gave birth to a child from him, after which they scattered. In 2015-2017, Antonia and Martin communicated on one of the popular social networks. Antonia, who at that time was not even 15 years old, left comments on the photos of the man, where he was captured with his daughter. It is assumed that their communication did not go beyond the virtual space. A few years later, the girl entered the university and fully focused on university studies. Having started her studies in the specialty of engineering commerce, she immersed herself in a new world and met a lot of peers who had the same aspirations as her: to study hard, become professionals, and build a happy future. Among them was Consuelo Uribe, a law student. Around the same time, Antonia was dating a young man named Rodrigo Canario Aguado. In August 2019, the couple broke up. Deciding to distract from the sad thoughts inspired by the breakup, Antonia suggested to her friend Consuelo to go somewhere. The date of the trip girls chose not by chance. That day, September 18th, celebrated the annual national holiday of Chile. Coincidentally, the event coincided with Rodrigo's birthday. As for the place of rest, the friends planned to get to the tourist town of Pucón, the road to which should take a couple of hours by car. In this town was the summer residence of a good friend of Antonia's family. Martin was also invited to Pucón for the celebration. He was to join an electronic music party where his friend DJ Rodrigo Morales was to play. Martin left Temuco at noon on September 17, 2019. He was not alone, but in the company of friends who had split into 2 cars. The man intended to return home the next day. Having reached their destination, the guys had a disco in a house rented by the DJ that same day, around 6:30 in the evening. Antonia and Consuelo got into a car and also headed towards Pucón. 3 of their buddies rode with them, but upon arrival, all were housed in different places. The girls stayed at the summer residence of the Uribe family. At about 8 p.m., they started packing for a party that was being held at the Black Room nightclub, formerly known as Sala Murano. The night promised to be unforgettable. The girls, tired from their hard studies, finally breathed freely. They got dressed up, put on makeup, and went to the club. There they opened a couple of bottles of sparkling wine and began to drink, socialize with others, and dance. Antonia's father, Alejandro, texted his daughter asking her to take care of herself, not to trust strangers, and not to put herself in danger. 10 minutes later, Antonia replied to him, promising to be careful and cautious. At this time, Martin's company was about to leave for the first planned party. As he later recounted at trial, they left there around 10:30 p.m. It was a disco with electronic music, and the friends stayed there until 2:30 or 3:00 in the morning. When they met, Martin and Antonia felt very good and cozy in each other's company. They danced and talked a lot. Both were happy in a special way. Around 1 a.m., an intoxicated Antonia and Consuelo got into a cab and drove to another club where they met up with friends and drank some tequila. At one point, Antonia walked away from the others and headed to the electronic music section on the second floor. There, she met her classmate Benjamin Morales. They danced and occasionally walked around the bar area and terrace before returning to the dance floor. Sometimes they would hold hands and even kiss. Soon, Martin showed up at the event. When he approached the bar, Antonia was completely drunk. Later, Benjamin bought her another drink, but Antonia dropped it. At some point, she suddenly disappeared. Around 6:45 a.m., Consuelo went looking for her friend and found her talking to Emilio Gobich, a mutual acquaintance of theirs. When Consuelo said she wanted to leave, Antonia replied that she would prefer to stay. Her friend advised her to stop drinking, but she did not listen, and a short time later she was chatting with Martin again at the bar. Later in his official written statement, Emilio said that he witnessed this 10-minute conversation, after which the couple headed for the stairs. Emilio noticed that Martin was holding Antonia's hand, but she was oblivious and looking upward. Whether she was talking to a man or was disoriented because of alcohol, this Gobich could not understand. But it seemed to him that the girl was not well, because her eyes were completely white. Emilio later speculated that Martin had invited Antonia to join him and his company at the rented house, and the girl had agreed. Temuco Police Sex Crimes Detective Marcela Calderon reconstructed the incident according to witness statements. According to friends of the accused, they left the club in 2 cars, and there was no room for the couple. That is why Martin and Antonia went on foot. On the way, they came across a supermarket, whose CCTV footage provided the most concrete evidence that they were walking together. Examining what she saw, Detective Calderon suggested that the defendant practically forced the victim into the store, as her resistance was evident in the video. As noted by prosecutor Miguel Rojas, also of the Temuco Sex Crimes Service, the girl's condition put her in a vulnerable position to the perpetrator. Antonia had too much to drink, and the alcohol had a negative impact on her nervous system, which was not observed in relation to the accused. The situation of domination on the part of Martin and resistance on the part of the victim was present, and this certainly does not justify the actions of the perpetrator, especially with regard to the first sexual assault suffered by Antonia. The couple was later caught on camera as they walked down the sidewalk again in the direction of the rented house. All 8 people present at the house agreed on one thing. Antonia and Martin showed up there around 8 a.m. There was only one woman in that company, 19-year-old Barbara Fredrickson. She had only recently joined the party and was the only one who hadn't drunk alcohol. This is probably why she accurately observed that the couple, whom she did not know, were heavily intoxicated. Antonia's own memories were fuzzy. She did not quite remember the details, but one thing was quite clear. Martin had gone into the room with her, where he had committed an act of violence, and then left to join his buddies, listening to music in the living room. Left alone and not knowing what to do, the confused Antonia called her friend, Felipe Inostrosa, but he did not understand anything from her words. The girl's voice sounded as if she was drunk and had difficulty expressing her thoughts. Unfortunately, Felipe didn't pay attention to her condition. Besides, he was in a different city and had had a bit to drink himself. It was too risky and a little absurd to go to Pucón to pick up Antonia, to take her to a house that was quite close to the rented one. Then the girl contacted Consuelo by sending her a voice message. Only after much effort did her friend manage to understand what she was saying. After determining her location via GPS, Consuelo went to look for Antonia along with her boyfriend, José Tomás Monje. While José waited outside, Consuelo entered the house and ran into Martin there. But she pretended not to know anything, hurriedly picked up Antonia, and they drove home together. Consuelo and José tried to calm the distressed girl, hugging her and trying to talk to her, but she was desperate. Her father, Alejandro, had no idea what was happening. He sent her a text message to see how she had spent the evening. In doing so, the man made a joke asking how much she had drunk, and Antonia supported his jokey. She didn't want her dad to find out what had happened to her. Consuelo and Jose insisted that the girl go to the police to report the sexual assault, but she refused because otherwise her parents would definitely find out about everything. The next day, Antonia met with Martin and decided to talk to him, but he acted brazenly and claimed that everything had happened consensually. This is what he said later on. For the next few weeks, Antonia remained silent about her experience of violence on that September night. She revealed the truth only to her closest friends. The girl could not rid herself of the unpleasant feeling. She felt that she had become dirty. She did not want to go to the police, as she was afraid that others would find out about the incident. To her friends, she asked them to keep their mouths shut. Deciding to carry her load alone, Antonia tried her best to act normal. Even her childhood friend with whom she was in close contact didn't notice anything unusual. Unlike Sigmund Aloso, a fellow student at the university, who realized that something was wrong with Antonia because her grades had dropped dramatically. For example, she failed 2 test papers, and to his questions as to why this happened, she answered that she was not ready because of a bad mood. In the midst of all these events, Antonia's secret became known to her former boyfriend, Rodrigo. Only rumors, distorted and unfair, reached him. Needless to say that the guy made his own opinion about the act of Antonia, and it spoke clearly not in her favor. On October 12th, the former lover wrote him a message with a rebuke, saying that she was not to blame for what happened. However, he did not believe her. This was confirmed by Francesca Duran, a friend of Antonia, who witnessed Rodrigo's emotions. The next day, Antonia sent a farewell message to the boyfriend. A little later, she shared in the family's messenger group a video from her childhood where she danced while smiling at the camera. It was like a signal that she couldn't cope with the difficult experiences. On October 13, 2019, Carla's sister came to visit her parents, and the first thing she did was go up to Antonia's room. She was lying on the bed, and Carla thought she was asleep. The light was on. Antonia asked for the light to be turned off, whereupon her sister asked her about Martin, and as she left, she told her that she loved her. A short time later, Antonia committed suicide on the 3rd floor of her home in Temuco. At about 7 p.m., Marcela, the girl's mother, knocked on her room several times but received no answer. When she went inside, she saw her daughter without signs of life. Distraught with grief, the woman ran to the neighbors for help. They came and helped to take the girl's body downstairs. Later, a forensic medical expert determined the cause of death to be self-suffocation. Questions arose that no one could answer. A bright, sociable girl, always striving for knowledge, dreaming of traveling, made such a strange decision. Why? Alejandro realized that if the daughter committed such a serious act, it means that with her there was a tragedy, which she carefully concealed. Determined to get justice, the man hired several private investigators. A few hours after Antonia's breathless body was found, he spoke to the local press and said that his daughter had reason to do what she had done. The notes started pouring in, the reporting began, the questions began. But Alejandro knew what he was getting into. The staff of the private detective agency were able to recreate the last days of the girl's life. The parents filed a complaint against Martin and began to wait for the results of the investigation. The father periodically received invitations to various TV shows where he spoke and told about what happened, swallowing tears. The country was going through hard times. There were many large-scale upheavals, and Antonia's tragedy resonated in the hearts of millions. The girl's name appeared on the walls of buildings, in hashtags on social media, on posters demanding justice. Her death had such a powerful effect that in less than a week, 7 new charges against Martin for alleged sexual harassment surfaced. The man's relatives filed a petition for legal defense and an appeal alleging that certain members of Antonia's family had violated the right to honor and respect for privacy, as enshrined in Article 19, Paragraph 4 of the Chilean Constitution. In particular, they noted that some of their personal data, such as address and phone numbers, had been made public and that they had received many aggressive messages and images on social media. Martin's family added that those involved included Antonia's loved ones. On June 12, 2020, the court in Temuco decided to grant the motion ordering the Antonia family to refrain from disclosing data and facts about the petitioners through social media. They were also obliged to refrain from offensive or defamatory publications. The decision caused outrage among many. people felt that such measures only served to protect the alleged rapist. Antonia's family appealed, but the Supreme Court affirmed the Temuco court's decision on July 21st. Martin's lawyer, Gaspar Calderon, then filed a petition with the Temuco Court of Appeals, requesting the imposition of protective measures. That same month, Martin was formally charged with assaults committed between 2010 and 2019, which was the beginning of an investigation that captured national attention, called the Antonia case. It has come to symbolize the plea for justice by thousands of victims of violence. On July 22nd, the loved ones of the dead girl and the prosecutor's office were once again disappointed. The Temuco Guarantee Court revoked the defendant's detention and ordered full house arrest. Judge Federico Gutierrez explained that this preventive measure should not prejudge the punishment. The Temuco prosecutor's office charged Martin with 5 alleged sexual offenses against other women committed between 2010 and 2019. However, the court chose to register only 2 of those incidents. Among the incidents was one that took place between December 2012 and January 2013. The complaint came from a 13-year-old girl. The decision on house arrest and the dropping of the investigation into some of the assaults sparked protests and brought thousands of outraged people on the streets in different cities across the country. Later, the Court of Appeal in Temuco reviewed the case at the request of the public prosecutor's office, canceled the precautionary measure taken, and decided to detain Martin, considering him a danger to society. A few days later, the same court lifted the statute of limitations for 2 other cases of violence. Alejandro worked actively with feminist organizations to draft a law that would establish penalties for similar crimes. In preparation for the trial, Martin's cell phone was discovered in February 2021. The prosecutor's office requested additional time to conduct an examination of the device and then reported the results. It turned out that the phone contained images in which the defendant displayed women's underwear and explicitly boasted about his actions. On August 26, the Araucanía prosecutor's office filed the indictment against Martin. Alejandro appealed to the community not to remain indifferent to the actions of such rapists. He noted the importance of taking action in situations where a woman is seemingly taken away by a man without force, but is under the influence of alcohol and therefore in a vulnerable state. He also asked the media to stop publishing images of Antonia in the company of the accused. In January 2022, pre-trial preparation hearings concluded, and Temuco Judge Alfredo Cox denied the defense's 7th request to change custody to house arrest for Martin. A few months later, on June 14th, the hearing began in Temuco Criminal Court and was scheduled to last 37 days. During this period, the criminal's defense presented a number of expert and witness testimonies, as well as documentary evidence. On August 6th, the court handed down a guilty verdict against Martin on crimes against sexual integrity and sexual assault. On August 26th, the verdict was announced, 20 years in prison. However, it did not take long for Antonia's relatives to enjoy a sense of justice. On September 6th, an appeal against the sentence filed by Martin's lawyers was accepted for consideration. A few months later, on December 29th, the Supreme Court accepted the defense appeal and ordered a new trial. The decision came after a lack of impartiality was found in Leonel Torres' conviction of Martin. Meanwhile, the tireless work of Marcela and Alejandro bore fruit. The formation of the so-called Antonia Law began. The aim of the project was to change several laws to improve due process, protect the rights of victims of sexual offenses, and prevent the recurrence of such events. It was established that a person who committed an act of violence and thereby pushed the victim to suicide would be punished with imprisonment. With the advent of 2023, preparations for the new trial began, which was not without surprises. On March 16th, Martin's team of private attorneys resigned, and consequently, the defendant's case fell into the hands of the public defense. Finally, on April 24th, the second trial began for 5 cases of sexual violence and 2 cases of forcible sexual intercourse committed between November 2010 and September 2019 in the Araucanía region. Martin waived his right to remain silent and gave his version of events. denying that he intentionally committed the crimes and attributing what happened to excessive alcohol consumption. In response, prosecutors said he chose the most vulnerable victims, taking advantage of the drunken women's inability to resist him. On July 7, 2023, the man was found guilty of sexual offenses. After the trial, Judge Jose Ignacio Rao stated that the evidence of the victims, witnesses, and police agents was coherent, consistent, complementary, and sufficient. It was also ruled that Martin could never again work in educational institutions or places that involved direct and constant interaction with minors. The federal prosecutor's office demanded a sentence of 41 years in prison, Araucanía Regional. Prosecutor Roberto Garrido said that no matter what sentence the judge handed down, they appreciated his decision because it meant that violence had been established and justice had been served. On July 28, 2023, Chilean justice sentenced 31-year-old Martin Pradenas to 17 years in prison for 7 sexual crimes committed against 6 victims. With the 3 years he spent in custody, he will serve 14 years behind bars. Is it necessary to talk about the frustration of a father who lost his daughter? Alejandro said that despite the fact that the perpetrator went to prison, Antonia's loved ones still continue to suffer unbearably. The verdict of the judge was only a consolation that could not relieve them of the terrible grief, because even 40 or 100 years of punishment for the criminal will never bring back the life of cheerful, kind, and bright Antonia.